When we talk about diversity and inclusion initiatives in the workplace, I challenge us to consider how important visible representation matters. It's not enough to have one person from an underrepresented group on our team or in our organization. This approach is one reason past diversity efforts in organizations have not worked as successfully. See, throughout my academic journey and my own professional career, I was mostly surrounded by white people. I'm not suggesting that being around white people or any other group is a bad thing, but the issue was the lack of diversity and always being the other. It wasn't something that I necessarily got used to, because how do you really get used to being in a room where no one comes close to resembling you? It just became an agreement that I made with myself that in order to accelerate my life to a new level, it meant surrounding myself with people who looked less and less like me. I experienced microaggressions and other forms of biases along the way, but as long as no one was physically harmful or overtly discriminated against me, I was complicit. This seemed like a manageable trade-off, but it caught up with me a few years ago when I was running a department for a company. Like all of the other companies I worked for, this one was majority white male. I could count the number of women in the company on my fingers. If there was anyone else from an underrepresented group, they must have been able to pass for the majority because I felt completely alone. I'm talking like 5 people of color in a company of 300 employees. No one was from the LGBTQ plus community who worked at the company, and if they were, they weren't open about it. I was one of 2 black women in the company, and the other black woman was on a different floor in our building, so I seldom saw her. There I was in an upper management position, crying before I had to go into work every day. I would often wish that I could get sick so I would have an excuse to not go into the office, which is absolutely ridiculous. I dreaded people staring at me the minute I walked into the office and feeling like I was some sort of novelty in the company because I was a black woman. I was even too embarrassed to complain to human resources when the office played rap music and chose to play lyrics that didn't bleep out the N-word. If I complained, would I feed into the trope of being the angry black woman who was always complaining about something? So I didn't have any other visible representation of me in the workplace, another black woman, someone who I could confide in or someone who I could aspire to become. On the outside, I smiled and pretended everything was fine, but the minute I went into the bathroom stall, I would burst into tears and count down the hours until I could escape. I knew that it would always be up to me to make myself feel welcomed in the company, or at least pretend to feel welcome. I didn't feel like I belonged, and I knew that regardless of whether or not I decided to look for another job, the same situation would follow me into any other company. I know that I'm not the only person from an underrepresented group who has felt like this in the workplace. My story is a cautionary tale of what happens when companies approach diversity, equity, and inclusion as a plug and play. It's human nature to want to be part of a group, and it's harder for employees to do that if they physically stand out and they're the only one who resembles them. Yes, standing out might mean that you're unique, but at what point can being unique start to feel unsafe in the workplace? Organizations have an opportunity to do better in their efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Instead of looking for the one of someone to fill an open position, which can be easily misinterpreted as tokenism, organizations can develop a slate diversity initiative. That means that companies develop efforts to mitigate bias in their hiring practices, which ultimately widen the net of net candidates that they source. This naturally increases the pool of diversity hires.